element is to look at the numbers of zero-emission vehicles to be expected for 2030. And then second, as the chair mentioned, it also provides the report some indications on our recharging and refueling needs and the related deployment of infrastructure. Now, let me first say a few words on the market trends. So what we see here is that the relevant technologies have matured at different speeds. We see a very strong investment and development in battery electric vehicles. So, for example, by the end of last year, we had more than 100 battery electric models which were available in full series or in small series production for high-duty vehicles. We also have seen some development in hydrogen, but here the numbers are much, much smaller. So right now we have around 20 hydrogen fuel cell models available in this market segment, but only in very, very small series production. If we assess or analyze the announcement of manufacturers of future investments and their scale, our takeaway is that the focus also in HDV will be on battery electric vehicles throughout all market segments. And there are a number of reasons which have been brought forward by the stakeholders, like higher efficiency, better fuel availability, and also better total cost ownership. Now, what does it mean? It means that by 2030, assuming that the current CO2 standards are going to be maintained, what we would need is around 400,000 zero-emission high-duty vehicles on European roads, and we would then forecast around 90% of those would be battery electric. Now, as regards my second point on infrastructure, here just to say that the targets which have been set under the AFIR regulation are supposed to only provide for the necessary minimum, network coverage. We obviously expect that also the private market investment in terms of infrastructure, so recharging pools for high-duty vehicles, will develop, but clearly this is an issue to be looked at. My third point is quickly on what are the main challenges which have been highlighted here. The first one is as regards trucks. We obviously still see significant differences when a truck is purchased, and obviously conventional trucks are much, much cheaper than electric trucks. Having said that, as you probably know, because these proposals are currently with you, the Commission has also put forward measures to support the rollout of electric trucks. For example, among others, the possibility to exempt such zero-emission vehicles from tolls under the Eurovignette Directive up until 2031. And also to ensure that the competitive disadvantage which these trucks have vis-à-vis conventional trucks, that this is because batteries are heavier, and this means obviously less payload, that the Weights and Dimensions Directive, which I think is also still in discussion in this institution, is adjusted to increase the maximum weight so that there is a better competitiveness of electric trucks. In terms of recharging points, what we expect are up to 30,000 publicly accessible recharging points to be rolled out by 2030. This requires massive investments, but besides massive investments, one of the key issues, and we are looking into this currently with our colleagues from DG Ener, is in fact the availability or access to electric grids. So this is in fact one of the issues which we think deserves primary attention. We are also looking now in terms of actions to support the rollout of zero-emission vehicles and infrastructure. Together with our colleagues, you certainly know inside the Commission that we are preparing for the demand side for trucks a legislative proposal on greening corporate fleets, where we are currently carrying out an impact assessment on emissions, competitiveness, on SMEs and costs. So this legislative proposal is supposed to come by the end of the year to this House for you then to deliberate. On the infrastructure side, we are now going to focus more thoroughly in the future on recharging points with our AFIF, so the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Facility, to support financially the rollout of HDV recharging points. This is also backed up by our Clean Transport Corridor Initiative, and where you may know that a ministerial declaration has been signed last week to focus on a number of TEN-T corridors to support this rollout. And as I mentioned before, together with DG Energy, we are working on the preparation of a grid package, which is supposed to be adopted early next year to address permitting and grid access issues. To conclude, from the technology side, we see that manufacturers are now producing the zero-emission vehicles for all use cases. We also expect that a big majority of zero emissions high-duty vehicles, heavy-duty vehicles, are expected to be battery electric by 2030, based on this report, and that also on infrastructure deployment for recharging and refueling, that there will be support going forward to ensure that the basic framework conditions will be in place so that these trucks can also circulate across the EU. And I stop here and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Now we'll move to the coordinators. I'll give the floor to coordinators, 3 minutes each, and then for 1 minute for the members of the parliament. So while coordinators speaking, please identify by raising your nameplate if you would like to speak. We start with the EPP. Mr. Giesecke, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair, and thanks, Commission, for the presentation. Very important topic, and the update is much appreciated. On the heavy-duty vehicles, of course, we see major problems in implementation, and there is, in a way, the question politically if the Commission is willing to have an earlier review from 2027 to 2026. So I would really like to hear if there is any willingness to prepare to speed up the process. In the presentation, the corporate fleets were mentioned. This is a very controversial subject, and in a way it is always a bit disappointing to see that now we have to work on corporate fleets because industry asked for it. The industry to which I talk, they overwhelmingly say we do not need any mandate for corporate fleets. So that will be a very difficult discussion here in the House. And what I missed in the presentation, if you talk about corporate fleets, I would love to hear something about the CO2 standards for cars and vans, because obviously there the need to do something is urgent. We have had 3 rounds of strategic dialogues with no real results in the sense of concrete steps that should be followed. So, yes, okay, I accept your point that corporate fleets will come, but then my expectation is that the CO2 standards for cars and vans have to be in a package to come together this year before Christmas. So in a way, a little Christmas present, which I expect, that would be very nice and would be good before Christmas to have it. Then the third and last point on the implementation on the heavy-duty vehicles, the trailers. A lot of companies suffers and they do not know how to comply with the high targets for 2030. So there is a case at the European Court, and now there is an appeal. Obviously, what industry says, if the rules stay like they are, we will lose in Germany in that sector, most of them medium-sized enterprises, 20,000 jobs, and in Europe 70,000. I would like to hear from the Commission what is their reaction to this problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Giesecke. And now on behalf of SND, Sergio Gonçalves.
Thank you, Chair. I will be reading this intervention on behalf of my colleague Johan Nielsen, who could not join us today. In general, this is quite an optimistic report, indicating that both manufacturers and analysts are expecting 33% of their sales to be zero-emission vehicles by 2030. This may or may not be just enough to reach the 45% reduction targets for heavy-duty vehicles in 2030. Two pressing questions, therefore, emerge to keep the ambitions high. First, on the upcoming revision of the regulation on deployment of alternative fuels infrastructure, the report says that this regulation provides up to 2030 presumably 50% of the demand for heavy-duty vehicle recharging, with the rest assumed to be supplied by markets. What space do you foresee for the market to grow with stronger provisions in the regulation on alternative fuels infrastructure? In other words, is there a case to be made that strengthening provisions in the regulation on alternative fuels infrastructure provide additional safeguards on availability of recharging points? On hydrogen, it seems that manufacturers are not betting large on it and that the current infrastructure is already more than enough for the demands. What does this say to you in the context of the debate on technological neutrality? Would it not be more efficient to focus less on hydrogen refueling stations? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. On behalf of PFP, I see nobody, ECR as well. We go to Renew. On behalf of Renew, we have no? Oh, okay. Okay, fine. Then the Greens, Kai Tegethoff.
Yes, thank you. First of all, especially also for that, for your assessment that gives quite a positive outlook, especially for the electric vehicles, heavy-duty vehicles, and the goals that we're pointing at there. Earlier this year, the Commission announced that it would financially support the deployment of 2,400 electric recharging points for heavy-duty vehicles as part of the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Facility 2024-2025. Given that the AFIF funds will likely be exhausted as of 2025, this will leave a financing gap for 2026 to 27 before the new MFF kicks in then. What plans do you have to address this funding gap for electric heavy-duty vehicles in charging infrastructure, and what role might the Sustainable Transport Investment Plan play there, and give it priority for just that infrastructure? And second, you have in your presentation also talking about hydrogen, mentioning that hydrogen is lacking behind, and that we're right now looking at a rather positive outlook towards the electric heavy-duty vehicles. Given that this heavy-duty vehicle zero-emission market will be heavily dominated by battery electric vehicles, And given that we have very limited public funds for the electric charging infrastructure, what is your view on targeting this on the electric charging infrastructure rather than hydrogen fueling points? Because it looks like that might be a reasonable approach given the circumstances that we encounter right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you for the information, but given that this is an interim information only, I don't have a question actually, but I'm looking forward to the development. Just let me say that the expectations that you mentioned are very optimistic. I don't think that this timetable is realistic in any case. You mentioned in the information that the sharp increase in sales has to happen beginning with this year, actually, in the next 5 years. I don't see that coming at all. And hydrogen is totally futuristic. It's not in line with the industrial development. So we are looking forward to the next information and for concrete figures when they happen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now we have first Mr. Jiménez Larraz.
Muchas gracias, presidente. Bueno, el informe presentado indica que según los fabricantes, de aquí a 2030 aproximadamente 1 de cada 3 vehículos pesados nuevos podría ser de cero emisiones. Esto solo representa entre un 5 y un 9%. El informe también reconoce que aunque el interés de la industria en invertir en infraestructuras de recarga está aumentando, muchos proyectos actuales se enfrentan a retrasos debido a los largos procedimientos de autorización y conexiones a la red eléctrica. En conjunto, estos avances resultan insuficientes y la descarbonización del transporte por carretera es urgente y debe contemplar todas las soluciones disponibles, adoptando un enfoque de neutralidad tecnológica. No hay que olvidar que el transporte pesado representa una cuarta parte de las emisiones del transporte. Por ello, me gustaría preguntar a la Comisión, en la línea con el señor Giesecke, si tiene previsto acelerar la revisión de las normas de CO2 para vehículos pesados y presentar lo antes posible una propuesta tecnológicamente neutra que incluya los combustibles renovables, y luego si va a publicar la Comisión un informe sobre el papel de los combustibles renovables sostenibles en el sector de vehículos pesados, con un análisis sobre los incentivos para su despliegue antes de finales del 2025, tal y como establece el artículo 15 del reglamento de vehículos pesados, y en su caso, ¿cuándo lo va a hacer? Gracias.
Thank you. Next, Sophia Kircher.
Now it's working. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the insightful presentation. The emission-neutral trucks are also significantly heavier, especially when it comes to increasing weights and dimension. So this would also cause much greater impact on the infrastructure, while the member states are lowering road tolls, which might also have big consequences. So I'm just wondering how the Commission sees that point.
Okay. Is that it? No more members of the Parliament who would like to ask the question? Perfect. With that, we go back to Commission for your answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this question. I take them one by one, or bundle them together in some cases. Maybe first I start with the CO2 emission standards and the related reviews. Indeed, and I start here with the review for cars and vans, which is foreseen for next year. But our latest internal planning is indeed, and I think this was already announced by the President, to advance this review to the end of this year. So the colleagues in DG Klima who are responsible for this file are currently working on an impact assessment. And indeed, as it was suggested by the Honourable Member of Parliament, Mr. Giesecke, we would expect that there will be a kind of a Christmas present or so, where probably you will have a package on greening corporate fleets, because my personal expectation is that the Commission will make a proposal on this without, at this point, having clarity how this proposal would look like, because as you certainly know, I mean, from all the feedback which we have collected, it seems that national incentives or fiscal measures also seem to be probably the most powerful tool to do this. So and therefore, obviously, probably an avenue to explore is indeed, like to see how member states think they would want to go about that. But as I said, we are still in discussion inside the Commission to look into the different possible options for this greening corporate fleet proposal. But given that there is an inherent link, obviously, with the CO2 emission standards also, because obviously we need to, I mean, it needs to fit into whatever changes the Commission may want to propose. I would expect that there will indeed be a package towards the end of the year comprising these two elements. This brings me to the second review, and this is the one linked to HDV, which, as you know, right now is only foreseen for 2027. So here I must admit that I don't have any news to share, because at this point in time no decision has been taken on the question whether we should also advance this review for CO2 emission standards for HDV from 2027 to 26, for example, to bundle it with the AFIR review, which is foreseen for 2026. Again, at this point in time, I'm not in a position to give you any news on that, but clearly, I mean, we will see how the discussion goes on cars and vans, and then probably also take a decision when to put forward this second review on CO2 emission standards, which is currently scheduled for 2027. On the trailers, your second question, I must admit that I need to speak to the colleagues who are following this case. So on that one, I would get back to you because I'm not able to provide you with any useful information at this stage. I think then there were a number of questions about our AFIR targets and our AFIR funding. On the AFIR targets, indeed, this is only supposed to provide for a basic coverage along the TEN-T network, and we would expect indeed the private sector to come in. Let me first say a few words on AFIF. We are currently in the process of finalizing the discussion on the second cutoff. It seems that there will be reflows which would be available for a possible third call and cutoff in 2026. So I'm not as pessimistic probably as Mr. Tegetov may be. So there is possibly still the chance to have one more call to cover the funding gap. But it is also true that we are currently in discussion, for example, with the EIB on how to best support the sector, so infrastructure operators, because what we hear, and this is certainly not news to you, is that commercial banks often put high-risk premium on projects related for HDV recharging infrastructure, because the argument goes that there is no substantial fleet yet of vehicles, and therefore banks consider some of these investments as high-risk investments. So basically, to cut a long story short, we are currently in discussion with the EIB and other national promotional banks to see if and how we could support them in, for example, taking over some of the risks which they may not want to engage in. On the question then of the adjustment of the targets, I mean, as you can imagine, for the time being, I mean, AFIE says what it says, so it's a bit difficult to say we are no longer accepting or supporting any hydrogen-related refueling infrastructure. But indeed, I think we will need to see, as part of the review next year, if there is not a need to revise the targets, because if indeed we see that there's probably more to do on the battery electric vis-à-vis the hydrogen, it may then also trigger some adjustments. But as I said, this is probably a bit premature to go into this at this point in time. Maybe just one more point on recharging infrastructure. Besides the question of access to finance, what we hear is indeed the question of grid availability, in particular for HDV. As you know, they require a lot of power for recharging, and therefore, like questions related to investment in grid modernization, but also in terms of ensuring quicker permits and obviously quicker access, so basically giving priority access to recharging infrastructure, is something which we would want to put forward, possibly together with the colleagues of DG Energy in the forthcoming grid package. So that's, I think, what I would want to say. Last question on the weights and dimensions directive. I mean, here I do not have, a ready-made answer to your question. I see the point you're making, because it is indeed true that, I mean, electric trucks are much, much heavier. And as I said, as a first step, we are now trying to help them, support them by changing the weights and dimensions directive. But indeed, this obviously also has implications for the infrastructure. And I think one of the issues is indeed then to see if and how we can support this, because if indeed, we see these figures to be confirmed, so 400,000 trucks by 2030 on our European road, it obviously will take a toll on the infrastructure, if I understood you correctly. But again, at this point in time, I'm not sure I have, a good answer to your question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, we conclude. So, dear colleagues, we have come to an end of our today's meeting. Please note that the next committee meeting will take place on Monday, 13th of October. And that's it. Many thanks for all the participants, interpreters, ushers, and technicians, and staff for helping to prepare this meeting. Thank you very much, and have a nice evening.